Welcome to part 2 of my North American adventure. As we stated in part 1, my goal here was to do 10,000 kilometers in a 1982 AMC Eagle wagon. The vehicle has seen a fair amount of maintenance and it's in good condition, but the question still remains, can I drive 10,000 kilometers and still have a vehicle that's in one piece? Well, part 1 had us drive down to Mountain View, California, and then back up here to Kamloops, British Columbia. 3,700 kilometers is not 10,000 kilometers. So we have a lot of extra ground to cover. Where are we going to go to fill in that extra amount of space? Well, like I said before, the Vintage Computer Festival doesn't just happen in one place. Mountain View, California is only one location. Vintage Computer Festival Midwest takes place in Schaumburg, Illinois. I have to get my cable out to Illinois from British Columbia. That is 3,700 kilometers one way. In total, 7,400 kilometers to Schaumburg, Illinois and back. And we're not including traveling around a little bit in the area. I feel like a vehicle of this vintage needs to at least see Kenosha, Wisconsin, even though this is a Brampton plant manufactured vehicle. To do this, we've had to make a couple of modifications to the car. I think the biggest and most obvious one is that we have the cargo box that's now sitting on the top here, and I'll discuss that in a moment. For maintenance-wise, however, we ran into a couple of issues that we needed to address before we could continue on with this. We used a quarter oil. That's no problem there. I had to replace the oil pressure sender. That there was no problem as well. We knew those were problematic. That was easy to replace. We had a weird clunking noise that was causing us problems even before we had that trip, and it was actually making me quite nervous in the first part. What happened there, even though I said the wheel bearings are okay, is we spun a bearing on the shaft. I don't even know how this was possible. We took it apart. The bearing was fine. The grease inside the bearing compartment was fine. There was no signs of water or dirt or any other kinds of contamination. It hadn't been shredding itself apart. There was no signs the bearing had seized, or anything had seized really, and yet the bearing, which is pressed onto the axle shaft, had spun on the shaft. And that was causing end play within the wheel, which was then causing the clunky noise we were hearing as it was interfering with other objects between the wheel hub and the differential. So we had to change the axle shaft, which is lucky I had one spare left over. We're hopefully going to pick up 2 more axle shafts, used mind you, that's just kind of insurance for this vehicle. As I now have pointed out, these axles are not necessarily reliable. We also had to do cruise control maintenance because initially it was being weird electronically and then it failed altogether. And what happened there, first off, is that we suffered a mechanical failure where the pickup that goes in front of the drive shaft knocked off the magnet. Something happened and it interfered and it hit it and knocked it off, and that's gone. I had to replace the magnet. That's working now. The other is that if you ever were to cancel the cruise control, even by tapping the brake because you had to slow down, well, it wouldn't resume. Or if it did resume, it was very unreliable. That I've determined, it's not a grounding issue, it's not a power issue, it's not a problem with the switches or the other components. It's the yellow regulator/control box that makes the cruise control work. I don't have a spare one right now. I have ordered another one. Unfortunately, it will not be here before we leave tomorrow. So we're just going to have to leave with the somewhat gimped cruise control and hope it holds out for the rest of the trip. Otherwise, we didn't run into any other issues. So I've done a minor inspection. Everything looks okay over the car. We've done our repairs. We're ready to go again. Now, like we did with the last video, I'm going to be logging all of my fuel consumption, my odometer reading, and how far we've traveled, and I'll be adding that in during post-process so you can do the math with me because, like I said before, I do have MPG calculations. I don't trust them. So I'm going to give you the numbers as well, so if I'm wrong, you can double check on those. It's also going to be fun because now that we have these MPG calculations, or really these numbers in general, with a vehicle that was just loaded down but had nothing else attached to it, we now have the roof cap on top of it, which is absolutely going to add drag. I want to see what that does to my fuel economy, especially on open, flat landscapes such as the prairies. This roof cap is actually kind of nice, and by sheer coincidence, it's also almost the same color pattern as the Eagle itself. No, this was not me by coincidence just grabbing it. This is by sheer luck. I've been trying to find a roof cap for 8 months. And to get one that's properly designed for these cars, it's getting really difficult now. I mean, the Tool and the Yakima ones are great, but they're designed for vehicles with roof racks. These are not necessarily designed for vehicles with roof racks. As you can see here, it has these straps which hold it down to the drip rails on the vehicle. Now, I don't feel too bad about these damaging the drip rails a little bit, because someone before me has already had some pretty nasty drip rail clips on here. These ones are rubberized, these ones are fine. Overall, I paid about $100 for the box, and there's another $100 here in UV weather resistant foam, so it doesn't damage the base of the vehicle, and brand new hardware and stuff like straps like this, because I was missing these. They're supposed to be rubber. These ones will probably survive the trip. I think everything's going to be good here, but it's an almost excellent fit on this vehicle. It's just one tiny drawback is it's a little bit too far forward for this car. Well, it'll be interesting nonetheless. It's nice and clean, it's sealed up, no nasty cracks. There was a reinforcing bar I had to put inside of this thing here. So originally the straps just came in and they bolted into the plastic base of this. And I could see that at least twice before, those had ripped out. So there's now an aluminum strip that goes across to the other side, so it's internally anchored so that this here cannot, like, this can hold it down tightly, and this is at no time now of risk of being ripped off the roof of the vehicle. There's also additional foam hiding down here, so nothing scuffs and scratch up. And that's why you're seeing this felt here, is that on these straps, they're not vibrating against the paint and damaging it. Likewise, just as before, we're going to have 2 GoPros that are going to be recording almost the whole time. There will be, again, our GoPro sitting up here, which is going to be our time-lapse recording all the way there and back. So that's going to be interesting. I had to get a whole bunch more solid-state discs just to save the image data from all that. And we're going to have the other GoPro here so I can talk to you and chat to you as we go along the way. If you remember from the last video, we had audio issues, and that was I broke the microphone quite early on, and I was never able to get it to be repaired. Well, I am still unable to get that microphone jack to work properly. We're stuck with the same tinny, horrible audio. I understand it's not great, it's not ideal. Believe me, I'm suffering as well when I go through editing and I have to fix all of that audio so it's not as super tinny as it sounds. You might also notice in this video here that my voice sounds a little bit stuffy than it usually is, and that's because, well, I'm just getting over something. Now, I can assure you it is not COVID. There are 2 tests which prove that. One that was taken after VCF West, which proved that I got nothing nasty when I was at the show, and another one that was taken last night before I recorded this video, which shows that, well, whatever I have right now, it ain't COVID. It's more than likely the flu. Something's been going around, and the other YouTube celebrities have been having the same issue. LGR even ran into the same kind of flu-like symptoms in New York City a couple weeks ago. So I'm just about over it. I'll keep an eye on it, but I'm pretty sure by the time I arrive in Illinois in several days from now, I should be significantly better. Now, I'm pretty excited about going to Midwest, especially while driving there. This is not just another Vintage Computer Festival in the Midwest. It's an endorsed event by the Vintage Computer Federation. It's kind of its own separate thing, but it's scaled quite exponentially over the last couple of years. Everyone remembers the Waterford Banquet Hall and the Clarion Inn in Elmhurst, Illinois, and everyone may also have on the record the complaints about just how crowded it got, and we were having issues with power. There was just so many people and so many computers in such a small space. This year, the stops were pulled out. It is a big event. Over 250 registered tables, between 35 and 50,000 square feet of convention hall with full-sized air conditioning and full electrical service. It is going to be a monster of an event, and I want to be there for it. This is going to be fun. Okay, enough talking, and now it's time for driving. I'm going to take the vehicle back, and I'm going to give it a cleaning. I'm going to pack it up, and then 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, we're going to head down for some gas, do our initial odometer reading, and then we're on the road. we go.
First stop, however, was the gas station for our baseline tank.
First tank fill. The volume and the quantity doesn't matter, but our odometer reading is 367,375. From this point onwards, that is our base odometer reading. Let's hit the highway. We have to be in Medicine Hat by the time the sun goes down. If you haven't been following around since the first video, we went to VCF West in the beginning of August. Well, it's been a month since then. It is actually September 2nd today. I was complaining on the way to West that it was going to be super hot going through Redding, but we're not going south this time. Well, we are. We're not going to be going that far south. I expect it to be significantly cooler the entire length of the trip. Maybe it'll get more humid as you get closer to the lakes, but I don't believe I'm going to be complaining this time around regarding air conditioning. Like I said, in the Pacific Northwestern package, you really only need air conditioning for a few short weeks of the year, and the rest of the time, it's fine. On the other hand, this is kind of uncharted territory for me. So the truth is, I didn't actually grow up in British Columbia. I moved out west back in 2000. I have not driven this far east of the Trans-Canada Highway in over 24 years. So a lot of things are going to be new to me. A lot of things will have changed for me if I've remembered them at all. But once we head south out of Winnipeg, everything is going to be new. Nothing is planned. It'll be fine.
Really, though, there was nothing to be concerned about. I was still in my neck of the woods, and I knew exactly what was up against me. Beyond that, I trust the highways are clean and clear.
I've been told over the years a story that I've never been able to confirm. And as I'm driving through Salmon Arm, British Columbia, the legend is that Salmon Arm had an AMC dealership here. And the Salmon Arm AMC was the single biggest seller in volume of Eagle wagons than anywhere else in Canada. Now, why? Well, I think what it was is that this is Eagle territory. All the woods out here are full of cabins, and it's hilly, and the roads are not necessarily great. Sure, in the 1980s, you could get yourself a large station wagon that could fit a family of 4, the dog, and your luggage for a weekend. Or for a long weekend at that. But you would have difficulty traversing those back roads. Well, with an Eagle, you don't have to worry about that. You can fit the family, the dog, the luggage. Hell, you can pull a trailer. And you still have 4-wheel drive that you can switch on and off as you wish. No one else was being able to supply that in the middle of the 1980s.
After Salmon Arm, it's just winding highway all the way until you get to Revelstoke. From Revelstoke, it's actually into the first national park we're going to go through, which means no gas stations. And I'm keeping an eye on my gas tank now that we have this aerodynamic church mounted on the roof of the vehicle. I pass through Revelstoke and then realize, you know what? Maybe we're not going to risk it to get to Golden.
First backtrack of the trip. I was supposed to stop in Revelstoke not only to get gas, because it's 150 kilometers after that to Golden, but also to check the straps on the roof. I mean, I can probably make it to Golden on whatever's left of this half tank of gas, but do you want to risk it? No. Okay, so our odometer is 367,582. I'm going to say we refilled it at 3/8 of a tank, so just below the halfway point. We added 36.007 liters at $1.69.9 a liter for a sale total of $61.18 Canadian. Let's keep going.
Now, between Revelstoke and Canmore, Alberta, there is the Rocky Mountains to contend with. But surprisingly, the traffic was fairly light, and the weather was doing absolutely fantastic. But like I said, between Revelstoke and Golden, we had to deal with a national park, Glacier National Park. After Golden, we had Banff National Park and Lake Louise. But eventually, we'd be arriving at the BC-Alberta border.
Alright, we are at the boundary line. One sign here facing away from me says, "Welcome to BC." There is another sign here that says, "Welcome to Alberta, Wild Rose Country." We have crossed our first provincial boundary. We are 5.5 hours roughly into the first day. We still have all of Alberta to cross to get to Swift Current, and hopefully from this point onwards, we're through the worst of the Rocky Mountains, I believe, and then it's going to flatten out, and then things should speed up a hell of a lot, because from Alberta onwards, it's 4-lane highway all the way across the province.
The cruise control at this point decided it was time to behave. This gave me an opportunity to actually enjoy the scenery. Banff National Park is quite beautiful, but while you're driving through it, you should pay more attention to the traffic, which is what I was doing because the traffic was beginning to pick up. From Canmore all the way to Calgary, it got more and more and more congested until we did finally reach Calgary, Alberta.
We are now passing through Calgary, Alberta. Population, I don't care. It is currently 2:50 in the afternoon local time. And there looks to be smoke on the other side of the downtown. That's interesting. Anyways, I don't plan to stop through here. We still have a quarter tank of gas, so we can likely get to the other side of Calgary before we're going to have to gas up. Other than that, cruise control is doing its same old tricks still. It's difficult to consistently test it because we're still on the edge of the weekend warrior traffic, which is everything between Salmon Arm, BC and Calgary is just almost endless traffic from people in Alberta rushing home after the long weekend. So hopefully once things open up on the other side of Calgary, I'll be able to do some tests here to see just how inconvenienced I'm going to be. You can tell I'm not happy about this. Not happy at all.
Spoiler alert, the cruise control was still going to be obnoxious for the remainder of the trip. But once we got through Alberta's biggest north-south junction, just outside of Calgary, traffic began to rapidly thin out. From that point onwards, it was just amazingly flat as we entered into the prairies. But after another hour of driving, I eventually did need to pull over and go get some gas.
Okay, next major fill-up. 368,073 on the odometer. We added 54.029 liters at $1.47.09 per liter at a total of $79.91. That's okay and all, it's cheaper, but when I went to go clean my windshield, I frickin' broke the plastic clip on my wipers. So now I gotta go stop somewhere in Medicine Hat or somewhere tonight and get myself a new wiper.
Now, you would expect at this point here to believe that the prairies are flat and dull and there would be nothing for me to do for the next couple of hours. But no, it was actually not that bad. Having lived around the mountains for so long, it was incredible to see things so flat, and there was just odds and ends scattered all over the place that you could see way off into the horizon. I mean, there was a statue of Don Cherry, there was microwave towers, there was cows, and, well, we were doing really, really good for time. So I was beginning to think that, you know what, we don't need to stop in Medicine Hat tonight. We can stop in Swift Current out in Saskatchewan.
Well, we are now traveling through Medicine Hat, Alberta. I have finally seen a highway sign that says Swift Current. So we're getting a lot closer to where our final destination is for tonight. In fact, the GPS says we're about 217 kilometers away, and we'll arrive at about 8:18 tonight. And it's currently, what, 6:20. So we're 2 hours, yeah, we're about 2 hours away at this point. I have realized that with my broken wiper, I can't get that fixed tonight. Like Canadian Tire and all the auto supply stores are going to be closed. But it's come to my attention, or I thought about this, look for a truck stop. Or try and find one of those, like, larger chain service stations and see if maybe they at least have replacement wipers. This is the kind of thing I don't want to go driving too long without, even though, like, there's almost no clouds in the skies. Anything could change in the next 24 hours.
For those of you who are used to traveling along the major interstates of the United States, as it turns out, the Trans-Canada Highway through the prairies has darn near nothing for major truck stops. It does have card lock, it does have smaller gas stations, but none of them seem to be stocking wiper blades, so I felt like I was kind of out of luck in that regard. Regardless, we had pulled through almost a full day at this point, and now that things had flattened out, the vehicle was a lot more easy on the gas now that we were no longer dealing with large hills and steep turns. Finally, though, as the sun began to set, I managed to make my way into Swift Current and finally think about maybe getting some food because I hadn't eaten all day.
And here we are, as the sun has set, we have arrived in Swift Current, Saskatchewan. Alright, I think the first order here is to try and find a motel to stay in for the night and start unloading my cameras because I'm sure the GoPro is just crammed full of photos and work from there. But other than that, not a bad day at all. Everything seemed to hold itself together quite well. Well, aside from the cruise control, like the back end isn't knocky or bumpy anymore, so we nailed that down. And everything else is, yeah, like even for fuel economy, we're doing good. We're an eighth of a tank, quarter to an eighth of a tank right now. With the roof cap on here, we've dropped down to like 8 to 10 inches of mercury when we're just at cruising speed. So we have lost a little bit of economy, but still a lot better than I thought it was going to be. So, anyways, I need to hunt down a motel.
I'd like to take a moment here to thank everyone who watches these videos. The AdSense revenue paid for the hotel every night along the way.
Good morning. We are now into the second day. I have checked out of the hotel and I have set up the GPS for our next stop, Fargo, North Dakota. So before we can do that, we're gonna have to stop for gas here because I'm back down to an eighth of a tank. And I also was visited by the windshield wiper fairy last night. So, what if I told you about talking while I'm filming? So we have to change a single windshield wiper because, you know what? Not living with that crap. I'm gonna deal with that before it tries to rain. You are a very talkative one, aren't you? Anyways, let's get gas and get our first numbers of the day. So, we added 52.623 liters at $1.52.09 per liter for a total of $80.46 Canadian. Our odometer is 368,476 kilometers. Okay, another one for the logbook. Let's go. So here is the plan for today. We will exit Swift Current, Saskatchewan, and we will head for another 1,100 or 1,200 kilometers to Fargo, North Dakota, where we're going to get our next place to stay for the night. There is a shorter route to go there than the way we're going to go, but that would have us go diagonally through North Dakota. There's a fair bit of zigzagging, and honestly, I want to stay in Canada as long as I want, or as long as I can, because the gas is going to be a little bit cheaper.
As a result, however, the penalty is we're going to spend an extra hour traveling east before it's then straight north to Fargo. Somewhere between Winnipeg and Fargo is going to be the border. Remember last time we did this? We had to deal with the fact that the chips and junk food were all sorts of problems. This time I'm not really going to hand them out all during the show. They're party supplies. I mean, they really are. I'm not lying on that one. So, here's hoping. I still don't want to lose $100 worth of junk food.
Other than the odd tree or maybe a grain silo, there's nothing out here. It is flat. There's no wildlife. It's just road and sun for every direction. And then I began to realize there's something else that I seem to be missing on this trip as well. Something I haven't seen for a couple of hours, in fact.
What's occurred to me, like we had all sorts of chaotic traffic until we reached Calgary. And then after Calgary, sure, all like the camper and RV and weekend warrior traffic dispersed into Alberta and the Calgary suburbs, but so did the transport trucks. Like even driving down to California on Interstate 5, like it was constantly passing like truck upon truck upon truck upon truck. And since Calgary, I mean, I've seen the odd transport truck, but there's almost none on the road. Like I'm looking ahead of me and I'm looking behind me, there's nobody. Even for like truck stops like Love's or Flying J or, well, I guess Buc-ee's, if Buc-ee's was out here. Like for all those major truck stop chains, I have yet to see more than 2 since I entered into Alberta. And this is Highway 1. This is the major highway that crosses Canada. Where did they all go? It's almost kind of eerie.
After another hour or so of driving, I began to notice that trees were beginning to show up on the horizon along the sides of the highway. This told me that I was indeed making a mark on crossing the prairies, and soon I would be within Regina city limits. As it turns out, however, and I wasn't aware of this, there's now a bypass that drives around the city of Regina. I took this opportunity to go get some food, and then continued on my way once I was well rested.
Alright, so we have just passed Regina, Saskatchewan. We are now about 550 kilometers from Winnipeg. By around the time we approach Winnipeg, however, is the point we're going to start turning south and start heading down towards into North Dakota. This GPS, on the other hand, is still very much insistent that I want to go diagonally through there. So as long as I approach Winnipeg and stay on Highway 1 and ignore its pleas to like take any road conceivably possible to go where it wants to go, we'll be fine. We got about a little under half a tank right now, so we still got a fair bit of driving here before it's time for more gas. Alright, we have finally stopped in Whitewood for gas. Odometer reading 368,880. We added 56.001 liters of gas at $1.55 and 9/10 of a cent at $87.31. We are halfway to Winnipeg at this point here. It is 1 o'clock local time. So I think it's going to be almost 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Oh god, yeah, there's a whole other time zone I still have to go through. Okay. Well, let's get out of here because this place is alive with hornets' nests. And it's kind of uncomfortable. You know, Another thing is that there's so many bugs. Like, the whole front of the car is just caked in bugs right now. Every single time I stop, there's flies and everything all over the front of the car. When I arrive in Chicago, I gotta wash the front of the car if I can. It's almost not presentable.
One good thing about seeing so many bugs is that it was an indication that we were approaching the easternmost side of the province. Manitoba is famous for its bugs, and once we reached that point, we were in the last province before we turned south into the United States.
Well, there's the sign for Saskatchewan. I think we've done it. We are through Saskatchewan, and we are now into Manitoba. So we have another 3 to 3.5 hours before we arrive in Winnipeg. Probably before we arrive in Winnipeg, we will start turning south and then begin heading down that way. I think it's through Grand Forks. So the border, I believe, is like 45 minutes to an hour after we start heading south. And we're 2/3 of the way through the trip. Now we just have to get down below the Great Lakes.
As the landscape changed from Saskatchewan to Manitoba, I was very much enjoying the change in scenery. You can keep your eyes locked onto the highway for hours at a time, and eventually things just kind of start to blend in and you don't even see it. As you go through small towns, there's reductions in speed, there's the odd traffic light, a speed trap, or just other road hazards that you may occasionally miss. So you're always trying to look at other things to keep your mind preoccupied. Zigzagging all the way from when we started to where I was now was one other technological marvel that followed along the Trans-Canada Highway.
Those towers there, I've actually seen quite a few times over the trip. Even back at Kamloops, we have one of those towers sitting up on a hill. What that is the Trans-Canada Skyway. It was a microwave network that ran from one coast to the other. The United States had a similar system that was, I believe, built and operated by Bell Telephone, and that one there just connected long-distance lines throughout the country. Up here in Canada, the Skyway did the exact same thing, and in 1958, most of it came online, and it became the longest coast-to-coast microwave network on the planet. Not only did it transfer telephone calls from Halifax to Vancouver, for example, it could also do video, and also radio broadcast streams as well. And now suddenly it was possible to get networks available over microwave over extreme distances at a time before really any other radio links were available. It had a good run. It lasted, it was the only system that was viable until 1971, 1972. It's funny, in my own family tree, I had people who were a part of the Annex satellite program. The Annex satellites actually began to replace a lot of the load that was being applied onto the Skyway. And then through the 1980s and into the 1990s, you had the likes of, say, Northern Telecom and modern Bell Canada, for example, who would begin to replace the remainder of the microwave network with fiber optic cabling, which we still use today. The towers are still there, and, there's no reason to take them down, so practically all of them have been repurposed now. But the large shell-shaped microwave feed horns that sat on top of them are long gone.
This would turn out to also be the last time I'd see one of these microwave towers on my trip heading east. For those towers now were heading north to travel around the Great Lakes and head towards northern Ontario. We, on the other hand, had another hour and a half left in our drive before we arrived at our easternmost terminus in Canada and our end of the drive on the Trans-Canada Highway, Winnipeg, Manitoba.
All right, and here we are, the end of Highway 1 as I travel eastward, and now it is time to travel south. So we're probably 45 minutes to an hour away from the U.S. border. So this will be interesting. It is currently 5:45 at night. System says that we are still 4.5 hours away from arriving. So, okay, we're doing all right. Now, to finish off the evening.
Our new southbound route took us around Winnipeg, so it was yet again another bypass route. Didn't mind that too much because it meant that I was able to keep a good fast speed and try and get as far as I could into the United States before it got too dark. But after about 45 minutes, I determined, you know what, maybe we should get some gas before we start dealing with US gas prices.
Okay, so last tank of Canadian gas for a while. We have put 53.015 liters in at a cost of $1.39.09 per liter. Total cost was $74.17. Our odometer reading was 369,325. We are now at a point in the trip where, in comparison to where we were in California, we are now well into Sacramento and the Bay Area. We are now, in fact, close enough to the border. It's time to consider the passport being pulled out. Fargo is another 3 hours away.
And another half an hour down the road, we reached the border checkpoint, and in thankfully short order, we were through. We were in the United States.
We did it! We're in the United States! They were totally okay with all the junk food I brought along, so at this point here, it's clear sailing for the most part. I'm knocking on fake wood right now. So, we are 210 miles from the other side of crossing North Dakota into South Dakota. We are 147 miles from Fargo, so we're still doing okay for time tonight. We'll be able to make it there. It's about 200 some odd clicks. Okay, so I'll find a hotel. I'm sweaty. I want to get myself a bed. I had an okay sleep last night. I want a better sleep tonight. But okay, that's one thing off. That's a relief right there. And the cruise control's behaving. So it's a fairly empty road. It's smooth sailing for now, at least. So into the evening we go.
Why, yes, I did in fact jinx the cruise control at that point there. That piece of equipment, which had been more or less well behaved for the entire day, now that we were driving into a strong headwind, that would continue on until the next day. It decided it continuously didn't want to play nice anymore and would kick out occasionally as I went into the night. Eventually, I just had to call it quits because running cruise control at high speeds when it's pitch black out is a terrible idea. But eventually, we did arrive in Fargo, North Dakota, and immediately I looked for a hotel and went to bed.
Good morning, good morning. It is just after 8 a.m. I am in Fargo, North Dakota, just leaving the hotel now. So a little bit of a detour, not too much because it's actually still on the way to Chicago. Since we're heading down to South Dakota and we're heading to Interstate 90, I need to go to Sioux Falls. I'm going to get this wrong either way. There is a person down there who wishes to meet me, but also he has a bunch of Eagle parts that I am looking to pick through, mainly spare axle parts. Hush, please. And then it's off to Chicago, and we'll be there in, 12 hours? Now, I did ask, do you want to be part of this wonderful video adventure? And they had to decline on that one there. So there won't be much, if any, talking about that little part of the trip. But I am currently at a quarter tank of gas this morning.
Turn right.
I still have basically all my oil in the car. Coolant's looking good. I think we're good to continue on here for a fair bit. But I think the next time I'll talk to you, it's time to get gas again.
The winds from yesterday evening were still blowing the next morning. Hell, they blew throughout the night. Not only did it make the travel a little bit longer, the engine also had to work harder, and that meant it took a dent on our fuel economy. Nonetheless, I was still able to reach the state line with South Dakota, find a gas station, and get our next group of numbers.
As it turns out, I was actually able to get all the way to the South Dakota state line before it was really time to pull over for gas. Kind of impressed. Remember, we haven't added gas to the vehicle since southern Manitoba. This is really good. Anyways, odometer readings, 369,701. We're getting close to 370,000 kilometers. We will do that before the end of this trip. We added 16.002 gallons of gas at a cost of $3.19 per gallon. For a fuel total of $51.05 American. We refilled this at 1/8 of a tank. All right, Sioux Falls it is. Figure out how to get back on the highway. I saw there was an exit. Got to ramp back on though.
Just like I had been encountering with North Dakota, South Dakota was still incredibly windy, and I was driving into it the entire time. But now that it wasn't pitch black out, I could see that there was definitely a few more hills than we had with the totally flat land we'd already been seeing, and there was windmills, and there was cornfields, which told me that we were definitely getting a lot closer to the Midwest than we were the day previous. By around noon, I had arrived in Sioux Falls, and spent about 2 to 2.5 hours there before getting onto the highway, returning north a little bit to Interstate 90, and then continuing my travels east to Minnesota.
Okay, I have done the errands I have needed to do here in Sioux Falls, so I have 2 new axle shafts, well, used but good axle shafts, 2 axle shaft hubs which don't have ruined splines, but I also now have various differential parts and a spare carrier for my axle. So now I have a bunch of rebuilding cores available to me. So we're going to backtrack here and head a little bit further back north, and then we're going to hit Interstate 90 and continue on east. What's funny is that this is the same Interstate 90 that I mentioned going through Seattle. In theory, and I'm going to use, say, Cathode Ray Dude here as an example. Let's say he got onto Interstate 90 and just stayed on it going east. Eventually, he would cross paths with me here. Both times, however, you go on Interstate 90, you head east, you end up at the Schaumburg. So I hit on that, and then it's another 6.5 hours, and we're there. We're done. So we are at, again, about 1/4 of a tank. So we'll probably make ourselves to the Minnesota border, I think it is. Yes. And then we'll probably gas up for as soon as I find a truck stop.
From here, the state line is about 30 to 45 minutes away. Just entering into Minnesota, however, we hit a milestone.
The odometer just rolled over to 370,000 kilometers. I've now owned this car for 100,000 kilometers. That doesn't sound like much, but remember, this car is over 40 years old. Well, I guess when we gas up, we're going to have to give it something special. Maybe give it a more premium gas. Not Supreme. We're going to wait till we roll over to 400,000 before we give it that, but we can absolutely give it a slightly higher octane gas as a reward. Thank you for getting me this far.
Entering into Minnesota, the winds had drastically died down, and now that it was flat again, we had no problem at all getting a nice, solid fuel economy again. I was able to do a fair distance into the state before I finally had to determine, yeah, we gotta pull over and get some gas before we run out completely.
Next tank of gas. Odometer reading 370076. We refilled it at 1/8 of a tank. We added 15.405 gallons at a price of $3.59.9 per gallon at a total of $55.44 American. All right, Wisconsin is next.
As I got back onto the highway, I decided to reset my GPS so I could figure out what my route was going to be, and then I realized I had a new plan at hand.
So I have punched the Schaumburg Hotel into the GPS, and this little stop to get parts has actually cost me 2 hours. I'm going to get through Minnesota, but I won't arrive in Schaumburg until 11 o'clock at night at the soonest. So here's the deal, because I know that tomorrow I wanted to go to Kenosha regardless of what happens. If I were to drive to Schaumburg tonight, I'll be there at 11. I won't be at bed until midnight, which I don't want to do that. So what we'll do instead, so I don't have to backtrack up to Wisconsin and then drive back down to Illinois again in the afternoon, is we're going to go make it into Illinois somewhere, or not into Illinois, but into Wisconsin somewhere, and we're just going to find a hotel and stay there for the night. And then tomorrow, we'll head on over to Kenosha, we'll do our stuff there, then we'll head down to the Schaumburg. It'll be after 11 o'clock by that point, so my reservation will already be set up and good to go, and the show begins the next day. Minnesota, on the other hand, I'm not looking forward to. Like, it's kind of the same thing as North and South Dakota, lots and lots of farmland, only this time now I'm not driving straight into a headwind. Now I'm driving into a crosswind, which does seem to be more aerodynamic for the car right now. The vehicle's not as angry trying to accelerate, so cool. Gas savings there.
No offense, really. Minnesota is flat and boring. I couldn't realize just how boring it was until I'd gone through Saskatchewan and said, wow, in hindsight, Saskatchewan's that much more exciting than Minnesota. And there was just construction. Perpetual construction. So when you weren't on one side of the road, you were on the other side of the road. And the day dragged on for what felt like forever. But eventually, we had a sudden change of terrain.
Look at that. I see things that register to me as not so much large hills, but I guess you'd call them mountains. We are almost, actually we're at mile marker 269 in Minnesota. We are almost in Wisconsin. I am excited, to say the least, that it is no longer flat land and farmland anymore. We're getting into hills. Well, or at least for a while. Oh, this is awesome. And as I cross over this bridge, we are finally in Wisconsin. We have a bit of one more state to go, and then we're in Illinois, and then it's the home stretch. But like I said, we're a little bit late here, so if I can make it a quarter to halfway through the state, you know what? That's good enough. We'll call it a night there.
A little bit past the state line, I decided before it got too dark it was time for gas.
Last tank for the day. Odometer 370454. We refilled it at 1/8 of a tank. Added 14.502 gallons at $3.09 of a cent for a total of $44.94. So our target here is Madison or the general facility, and then that's it. Like, everything else is bonus, but as we get closer to Chicago, it gets more expensive. But we can't stay out here in cottage country either, because it's going to still be expensive as all hell. All right, so I am just outside Madison, Wisconsin. I still have 3/4 of a tank of gas, and I am going to take this opportunity to stay at a Holiday Inn Express.
Madison is not that far down the road from Kenosha, so I was exactly where I wanted to be, and I still had a bit of time to eat. But sleep was definitely on the menu.
Good morning, everyone. We are on the last leg towards Chicago, and we shall detour today. Two things. First off, there is a car wash, one extra exit ahead of me, so we're going to go there and rinse the car off because it's gross. And then two, we're heading to Kenosha.
This is where I discovered that not a lot of the Midwest has manual car washes for some reason.
This truck wash and this car wash has been mostly closed for about a year. So that is the problem I've found the whole way here, is that everything's large truck washes. They don't take small cars. Normally I guess out here, it's all automatic car washes. You can't put a car like this through an automatic. It'll break off the antennas and, well, you know, there's a whole roof cap on top. All right, well, we'll continue on to Kenosha. Thanks. And if I see a place I can rinse off, we'll do that. Other than that, looks like this is how we're going.
The plan from here was to take the highway out towards Milwaukee. Just before Milwaukee, we'd be able to bypass it and then head immediately south, not just towards Chicago, but also to Kenosha. I would continue to grumble as I entered into Kenosha that the car was absolutely disgusting and I needed a car wash, and once again I went to go find one. I did, and it's an automatic.
I thought that was actually going to be a manual wash bay. There's just another automatic car wash, which is not what I want. Is there really nowhere around here just to spray water on a freaking car?
Having thrown my hands in the air in absolute frustration at not finding a car wash, I admitted something and did the 3 massive words all men hate to do: ask for directions. And sure enough...
I mean, it's an automotive town, so it doesn't hurt just to stop at pretty much any garage and say, where's a manual wash bay? And they said, go around the corner, half a mile down, and you'll see it on your left. And you know what? I can see it. So this time, I'm going to get it. Hooray!
After a badly needed wash, the car was finally ready for Kenosha. And the first place on the list was AMC itself.
You see the big empty lot? We're here. Welcome to what used to be AMC Kenosha.
If it's not obvious, the Kenosha plant hasn't been here for a long time. Operations began to wind down not long after Chrysler purchased AMC. But the final operations on this site ended in 2010, with demolition beginning in 2012. What's left now is that in one corner of the large plot, which is now in the process of being redeveloped, is a sign covering over what used to be at this location and the history of automaking here in Kenosha. For this vehicle, at least, it's a bucket list item. Because even though, like I mentioned, this vehicle was built in Canada, this here is ground zero for AMC. And as it says on the sign, this was also the last vehicle AMC would ever market. After taking a couple of minutes to photograph the vehicle, I decided it was time to head down to the shore of Lake Michigan. This marks the end of our easternmost travels. This is also probably the first time in 40 some odd years this car has seen Lake Michigan. It is also entirely possible this will be the last time it ever sees Lake Michigan. So ceremoniously, it received a little bit of water on the hood ornament, and then it was time to hit the road to Chicago.
welcome to Illinois. Illinois. We have now arrived, finally, in Illinois. And we're damn near getting close now to the, we're damn near getting close now to the Schaumburg. We're also heading up into toll zones now. So, I'm getting mixed responses on this one here. Some of it says it's now pay by plate. Others say it's pay by cash. And others say, why don't you go and confirm the legend? That is, that in British Columbia, no external services can actually toll you. Well, it's a toll road anyways, so let's give it a try. We're almost there. We make it there in a tank? Maybe. Rather ominous. Either pay by plate or pay online. Doesn't say nothing by cash. Okay, looks like we're doing this. Seriously, if this works, that's cool, and then they'll want me for the rest of my life. On the other hand, if this doesn't work, okay, you know what? I'll pay like a $75 violation. Alright, here we go. $1.75. Click. You have 14 days to pay online. So I can actually get home and pay these if I wanted to. That's kind of nice.
Tolls and cracking jokes on being on America's Most Wanted aside, I really wasn't all that far away, and even then I didn't have to stay on the tollway for all that long either. Soon I was able to exit off of it, take some of the smaller roads, and eventually, half a mile from my destination, I arrived at my last gas station.
The final gas tank here in Chicago. Everything this point onwards is for the West. 370,918 kilometers on the odometer. We added 14.005 gallons of gas at a price of $3.59.09 for a total of $50.40 American. Now the question is, how much further do I have to go to use gas to get to the hotel? And the answer is, I don't. It's just around the corner. We have arrived at VCF Midwest.
I could have walked there from the gas station at this point, but I didn't want to because remember, my car is still full of crap. This, thankfully, is where the party begins.
Ooh. Good morning. So after I arrived at the hotel yesterday, I was able to unpack a little bit, get things staged up in my room on the 7th floor, and surprisingly there's 9 more floors above me. And, well, okay. So, this is a hell of a room. I don't think I've ever seen a place so luxury. There is the table. There's stuff for a friend. There's more stuff for a friend. There is half of Canada hiding on the table here. And more stuff for people. My God, I brought so much stuff with me. I think George Carlin had a thing on stuff. Alright, well, I'm going to shower, and then I'm going to head down for breakfast. And then in a couple of hours, setup begins. Okay. Oh, I got a bridge to get across here. And off we go. Welcome to the Exploration Hall. Jesus, AJ, your setup is already amazing. Jeez, we're...
Oh God, so's yours.
Thanks. Okay.
I just use my own because, you know, I'm anal about it, but...
It's time to unpack.
Now, like I had said at the very beginning of this video, I was under the expectation that the Vintage Computer Festival Midwest this year was going to be unlike any other previous show. We had dealt with large crowds in the past and the very tight and cramped spaces of the previous venue. This was a brand new venue, and as a result, even though when the doors opened the next day, it felt like a lot less people were coming through the door, attendance was far higher than anything we had seen at the Waterford Banquet Hall the previous years. If it was computerized or electronic and you haven't seen it in 30 some odd years, it was at this show.
Y'all trying to give me a book. I need... Go 535. Morning. Good. I hate to be that guy, but I'm here to shake you dinner last night. Oh, yes. I think it's about 20. Should I make it ring?
You said 535, or are you going to call this?
Oh, you can call that, or I can call you if you want.
Yeah, call this.
200.
No wires, kids.
And notice it's coming out of the police scanner too.
Oh, okay. All right, cool.
This call is not secure.
I heard it chime.
Yes, it did. Actually is the juxtaposition of key to disk versus key to tape. And that's one of the reasons this was so important. So this NX480 system, which you may or may not have ever heard about, which is
I'm too damn busy. Yeah, you heard about this?
well, and did I already provide you with the Forgotten Machine shirt? Well, want another one?
Hello.
Let's hope this works, because these connectors are a little bit.
Boo.
If it's a vintage tech or YouTube personality that you know from online somewhere, chances are they were somewhere in the crowd. Everyone was just having a complete blast. There was food, my table was an absolute hit, other tables were an absolute hit, but there was one other thing that Midwest is famous for, and that's the evening parties that are thrown typically by other table operators. Sometimes they're happening down in the lobby, sometimes there's stupid nonsense happening out in the parking lot.
Yo, check it out. The 16th floor is normally reserved for VIPs and like conference rooms, private conference rooms. In this show, it's the Unreal Tournament room.
It's like, okay, what do you expect? Kids like.
Other times it's happening up in the VIP suites in the high end of the building where there's LAN parties of Quake and Unreal Tournament, music, and of course, alcohol and the mixing of a local Chicago classic, Jepson's Malort, with other drinks to see if they could make it taste better than washer fluid.
This is balls with Malort. Dear God. No.
No, we don't want to have people jump out of the window, please. That or my fucking 60 proof rock.
When I was talking about it.
It's actually not that bad.
And they say nerds never get to have any sort of fun. Believe me, some of us had hangovers the entire weekend. By Sunday afternoon, we were all exhausted, people were beginning to pack and head back on home, and I was finishing off my own experiment to see if this new venue could handle the power draw of all these amazing machines running at once. It did! After this, I began the very careful Tetris job of repacking and reloading my vehicle, and then one pizza, a party, and another sleep later, it was time to go.
Well, it's the last day. I am now fully packed. The hall has now cleared out. And almost everybody, almost, has gone home. If I look just out over there, there I am. Car is completely packed and it is ready to go. I just need to check out. And that's it, folks. We begin the trip home.
We are packed. I believe our camera is rolling. Let me check that. Alright, we are good. GPS has mostly figured out my route home. Alright, we're good now. Ladies and gentlemen, Computer Festival Midwest officially has ended. I am out of the hotel room. I am on my way home. In 3 days, hopefully, I will return back to civilization, and the car will take me to work the next day.
And then, like clockwork, this had to live rent-free in my head.
My water pump is chattering right out of the box. I'm not even out of the hotel lot. And it went away. Really? You're gonna do that to me? Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on that.
The plan for today was to take Interstate 90 to Interstate 94 and then take Interstate 94 back to Fargo, North Dakota. Barely an hour into driving northwest, I suddenly saw a very familiar plate and driving style.
That truck there, Surrey, BC Trucking. Like, yep, nope. And he's got a BC plate on him. And in typical tradition, he sucks at driving. Like, he wouldn't let me through, which again is par for the course for terrible Surrey truck drivers. But also, I'll try and attach a photograph here. His windshield's smashed, so his vehicle's not even safe to be on the road right now. Which again, for Surrey truck drivers, is par for the course. There is no escaping the terrible Surrey truck driver. At least he hasn't hit an overpass yet.
Okay, I've promised myself I'm not going to make any more complaints like that on camera until we get back to BC. Once we were out of Illinois, we were into Wisconsin. Once we were in Wisconsin, I wanted to quickly stop at Culver's to get some food for the road, and then we continued our way on our long, long drive in reverse back up through Madison and continuing on until we arrived at a gas station for our first refill.
First return tank of gas. Odometer is 371, 278. It was all, well, mostly highway driving. We refilled it on 1/8 of a tank, and that came to 16.001 gallons at a price of $2.99.9 per gallon at a total price of $47.99 American. Okay, so hopefully that should get us most of the way to Fargo, which is where we're going tonight. And it's Frappuccino time for me, because I'm tired.
I was fatigued. I was running on far fewer hours of sleep than I was used to for the last couple of days, and I was still completely on the fence on whether or not I wanted to continue to Fargo, then head north and go back exactly the same way we went, or go diagonally through North Dakota and back up into Saskatchewan and then meet up with Highway 1 somewhere in the middle. Eventually, though, Wisconsin was in the rearview mirror and we were heading back into Minnesota.
Okay. So we are now exiting out of Wisconsin and entering back into Minnesota over the St. Croix River. We are still technically about 4 hours away from Fargo. That is my goal at a minimum, so if we arrive on time, maybe even early, maybe we'll just stop at Grand Forks instead to get closer to the border. But it's hot out. Cruise control's doing not cruise control things again and being stupid. Whatever. We got a half a tank. We can keep going. Alright, next tank fill. 371,781 is our odometer. We refilled again at 1/8 of a tank. We added 16.002 gallons at a cost of $3.14.09 or 9 per gallon for a total of $50.39. We are probably an hour and a half away from Fargo, so let's keep going and see if we can get a hotel.
Like Minnesota had already been for several hours, it continued to be flat, dull, and really, for the most part, the most boring state or province that I traveled through during this entire trip. Sorry, folks, there's just nothing to see here. Eventually, though, the sun began to set, and I arrived in North Dakota and Fargo not long after, only to be greeted by amazingly eye-wateringly expensive hotel rates because it wasn't the weekend? I'm not entirely sure. I decided at this point here we weren't going to go to Grand Forks. We were instead going to continue diagonally through the state.
Overcast, Castleton. Alright. Guess it's time to hit the road again soon. Okay, I'm about to leave Castleton, North Dakota on my way back to Canada, and decided since we heard, or at least I heard what sounded like a water pump noise when we left Chicago, we should be looking under the hood a little bit more to make sure nothing's bad. Okay, so there's bugs. I don't see staining. Oh, what do we got here? It's slicked. Oh yeah. No. It doesn't. Don't tell me I have a third water pump going on me. Well, let's see for fluid. We still have lots of fluid, but I can definitely tell. You can just see on the L there's something sitting there that hasn't evaporated. That's gotta be coolant. So I think we're losing our water pump bearing. God, that sucks. I've changed these countless times. I mean, if you don't tension the belts on these correctly, the side pull destroys them, so they're kind of a pain in the ass. They're not hard to change. They're very cheap. They're like 20 bucks. There's not even a core replacement on them. But, okay. We'll keep an eye on that and hope to God that that's not a problem. How are we doing for oil? I haven't checked that in a while. Oh, wow. We're still doing good, though. May want to go for a quart here within the next day. Alright, cool. Let's hit the road. I hope that doesn't cause me problems.
Oh no, there's water pump bearing sounds. Alright, well I'm gonna go across the street here and I'll see if it goes away. I've heard that happen before. And we shall work from there. Get out of here, there's already flies in here.
Turn right.
Yeah, no. We went across the street and the chattering went away. So it is worn. But it's still, once it warms up, it's tightening up a bit, so. Okay, I'll work with that. That Subway last night, and they were out of flatbread. They're still out of flatbread, so I guess it's a very low-run town. Alright, on the road we go. Swift current tonight, or medicine hat.
I was pretty committed at this point here to be taking the diagonal route that I was mentioning before. Even back when we were traveling through Saskatchewan and Manitoba, the GPS would not shut up about taking this route. Now we were taking it on the reverse trip. Going this way meant that we were going to be exiting off of the interstate and start taking some of the smaller, more country roads along the way. A bit of a scenic route, but it would save us a couple of hours of time getting back into Canada. Hopefully.
Alright, so it's been 40 miles since I had seen a gas station on these smaller side roads going diagonally. I'm in Carrington, North Dakota, for the record. So I might as well stop for gas anyways, because God knows when I'll see another gas station. So we did 14.014 gallons of regular at a price of $3.13.9. Total of $43.99. We refilled at 1/8 of a tank with an odometer of 372,159 kilometers. Alright, we'll keep going this way. It's going to be most like this the rest of the way. It's just these side roads and other nonsense like that. And I've once already caught this GoPro saying the memory card's full when it's not even remotely full. So I think this memory card is finally starting to die. What joy. Well, we're almost home. I guess it'd say it'd be a day and a half of driving left. And that's about it.
And yes, it indeed was beginning to forget that I was trying to record things at times, and as a result, there's a couple of videos that have been, well, forever lost. Didn't matter though, the scenery was beginning to change again. If it wasn't from the smoke from the neighboring state, it was getting a little bit more hilly, and well, what I was able to see was interesting. I mean, we still had our farmland, we had hills, we even had missile silos, which was an interesting discovery I made later. There was also oil wells, which told me that we were indeed getting closer to the border, and finally, we did arrive back at the border.
And just like that, I have returned to Saskatchewan and back to Canada. So every time I cross the border, and I've done this before, California was no different. Heck, even to do the interim computer festival, it's always a fight. So what happened this time around, for various reasons I'm not allowed to actually record it, they needed a declaration of brokerage for export to the United States of all my machines. You know, like declaration, like the value, like where did you get them, like how did they get into Canada kind of stuff. Stuff that, it's a lot of moving parts that I'm usually not used to. As a matter of fact, okay, like that's all new to me. How have I been doing this now for how many years? And this is the first time I've only been told about it. One of these days, it's going to get even worse than this. And it's already happened once before, where I had to pay duties on 45-year-old disk drives that were, like, from eBay value. And I had to pay, like, $200 on that. That stung. But, like, alright. But this is why I keep receipts and maps and stuff like that during trips like this. They were wondering, are you sure you went to Chicago? Well, I have the gas receipts that said I was there, and I have everything else that proves that I was there, so we're good to go. Alright, so let's continue onwards here. It is currently 3:30 in the afternoon. It would be very nice to make it to Swift Current tonight. It would be even better to make more time and end up at Medicine Hat, or just get closer to Alberta and home.
Since the last time we were going through Saskatchewan, I realized abruptly that there was no truck stops or major gas stations for considerable distances. As soon as I could find a nearby town, I pulled over and loaded up the tank.
First return to Canada tank. Odometer is 372,543 kilometers. We added 54.004 liters at $1.59.09 per liter at a cost of $84.19 Canadian. That'll get us to Swift Current. It'll probably get us through to Alberta. We'll see. But beyond that, not many tanks left, thank God. This has costed me a fortune in gas.
But as I left town, the engine suddenly dropped dead.
Okay, that was unexpected. I got just outside of Estevan, and then I heard the immobilizer disengage. So, I think I jiggled a wire. Good. Seems happy now. Alright, that was weird. Let's see what happens.
Continue 84 kilometers.
Yeah, no, there's there's a security interlock that I've built into the vehicle. A fob is required to activate the ignition system. And if the engine's turned off after a certain period of time, battery voltage drops too low, or the wiring is tampered with, sure, you'll get 15 seconds from when it detects the fob to start the vehicle, and if it doesn't see that other signal voltage, it just disables the engine again. Not the starter, disables the engine. Ah, this is interesting. Okay. So, I crawled around to fidget with the wiring to get the cruise control to behave. And I'd gotten it working. And then I noticed the cruise control stopped working. And about 15 seconds after the cruise control stopped working, the immobilizer kicked out. So my wiring, something's up with my wiring. Okay, but that's a clue. It didn't see the engine running, so as a result, it kicked it out. Wouldn't be surprised there. Some of that wiring's kind of dodgy. Alright, I guess I'll look into that when I get home, but cool. I'm back into the flatlands, and I have cruise control again. Now, how long does it hold up? We know the story at this point in the game. And so our little shortcut here has finally intersected with the Trans-Canada Highway just outside of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. So that is a fairly decently long day. And it's also occurred to me that we went through a time zone change, so we've lost an hour. So right now it currently says 6:40, and this says we'll be arriving at 7:28, but in reality it's like 5:40, so I still have another 2 hours or something like that before I'm going to end up in Swift Current. Okay, I guess that writes off Medicine Hat, because that's another hour or so down the road. I'm just glad we're on Highway 1. This basically means now I don't need to leave Highway 1, for the exception of maybe gas and hotels, all the way home. That also means we're that much closer to making it home. Arriving in Swift Current, finally, just before the sun sets. We are right back exactly where we were on the first night. So I have a number of options that are available to me for hotel rooms, and what I'm going to do before I do any of those is clean the windshield, go find some food, and then choose well, any number of places. There's a Super 8 right there, in fact. So, I am going to call that good for now. And here's a gas station, so I'll start wiping here.
If you ever stop in a small Saskatchewan town and they have a Chinese restaurant, make a thing to stop there. Traditionally, these places have amazing food, and Wong's Kitchen, in this case, has been there forever.
One last check on the car, see how it is behaving. Oh wow, it's dried out. That's interesting. We haven't lost any more coolant either. Yeah, it's weird. So we had a leak and it went out. Now, you can see it right there. The coolant splatter against the alternator bracket. So it's definitely been slinging coolant at one point or another. We saw it. And we're still basically the same for oil consumption. We may very well make it back home before we have to add oil.
Odometer reading 372,938. We refilled that on 1/8 of a tank, and that gave us 56.027 liters at $1.48.09 per liter, for total sales of $83.42. I think the next time we're going to need gas is Canmore, Banff, somewhere around there before we just enter into BC, because we have all of Alberta and a little bit more of Saskatchewan to navigate, and then we're back in BC, and this trip is finally over.
The weather report for that day indicated that it was going to be overcast and we'd start seeing rain by the time we reached the Rocky Mountains. Since there really wasn't much else to see, as we had already seen all of this just going the other direction, I turned on the cruise control, turned on the radio, and listened to that until we finally hit the Saskatchewan-Alberta border.
Alright, and according to the signs and the GPS, we have exited Saskatchewan. We have now entered back into Alberta, heading westbound on Highway 1. So, it's telling me we have about 350 kilometers before we hit Calgary. We still have a little over 3/4 of a tank of gas. So we'll definitely make it to Calgary. Will we make it to Banff with that kind of gas? No idea. We're doing really good so far. We made it to Calgary, and it's time for gas again. So we're at 373,433 kilometers. I mean, I'm going to say I refilled at 1/8 of a tank. Let's be honest here, it was there was a little bit less than 1/8 of a tank. We added 63.015 liters at $1.38.09 per liter, for a total sale of $87.53 Canadian. I did do an oil check, and we need oil. We're just above the fill line. This place here only has a synthetic, so I have to hopefully scoot further down the road and find something better that has, I don't know, Pennzoil or something. Otherwise, I do have a bottle of Mobil 1, but it's buried in the back. Get out of here.
You know, for a province that touts just how much oil it pulls out of the ground, I was amazed just how little actual oil was available. Everything I was finding was synthetic. So before I went too much further, I pulled over and decided to use the one spare bottle I'd been carrying along this whole time.
Well, I went through Calgary, inquired with at least 2 gas stations regarding having Pennzoil. And yes, I'm going to be picky about this, I'll explain. And no, none of them had them. They had their own, like, store brands. Whatever, that's fine. I don't care too much about that because I have to change the oil here pretty soon anyways. However, the bigger issue is that...
80 meters, then take ramp left.
Hush.
Take ramp left.
Hush! Is that they're all full synthetic blends. And this is not full synthetic oil I've been putting into this car. And this far away from home, this close to being able to say we pulled this off, I don't want to start blending oils in an attempt to see what happens and what doesn't happen. So I just grabbed the bottle of oil that's been in the back of the car since, oh God, since Sacramento, and just put that in, and that'll get us the rest of the way there. According to this, we are 575 kilometers away. No, where are you? 580 kilometers. 580 kilometers. We're 580 kilometers from home. That's it. We're done. So, 6 more hours.
Leaving Calgary, we began to run back into hills. Soon it started to rain, and not long after that, I saw mountains.
It has started to rain just outside of Canmore, but I can most assuredly see mountains ahead of me, which tells me not only are we close to the Alberta border, we're almost close to home. The Rockies. I haven't seen mountains in damn near a week.
My mind was more or less coasting at this point. I had already seen the scenery, the weather was absolutely miserable, I was in no rush at all to get home, and the highways seemed more or less clear considering that it was currently a weekday. So I could slouch back a little bit and enjoy the rainy but otherwise clear roads of a weekday until finally we were at the threshold and into our home province.
And while it is continuing to rain, there's the sign, welcome to, it's covered in stickers, welcome to British Columbia. We are now 420 kilometers away from home, and this is basically the home stretch at this point here. This is like traveling up from the coast, except we're now coming into the province from the opposite side. Golden is 73 kilometers away, and yeah, we're doing great. You know, rain. Seems to be lots of rain over here.
Now, BC's highways have a little bit of a reputation. If it isn't for their safety issues, it's the fact that in many places, it's not 4 lanes running the entire length of the province. Instead, you can run down to 3 lanes with an alternating lane on either side. Some places only get 2 lanes. This usually results in accidents, and I was kind of expecting this to happen at some point, and it finally did.
I think I said at the very beginning of this trip that one of the reasons why I was so glad to be leaving a day earlier is because that area between Golden and Revelstoke, or even just the BC-Alberta border, is so prone to having accidents. We had no issues going east, but going west, I've been sitting here now for 15 minutes just waiting in a lineup because, again, there's been an accident and it's burning away all of our time. Actually, vehicles are moving. Hurrah!
With the accident cleared, it was now a straight route to Revelstoke. Mind you, I was now stuck in a cluster of cars, all trying to go the exact same direction as well. The weather even began to clear up. As I was beginning to approach Revelstoke, the rain stopped and the sun even began to come out. Finally, the light at the end of the tunnel. I was this close to the Shuswap, and nope!
And like clockwork, the sign says, Highway 1 closed west of Salmon Arm, which means, God Christ. Alright, detour time? We'll figure something out.
That close. That frickin' close to home. And of course it decides it's going to do that. If I hang around and wait for this traffic to clear this time around, the sun could very well have set by that point. I was arriving into Salmon Arm. I needed a solution here because I wanted to get home. I was less than an hour away, and I was not about to say, that's it for the night here.
Well, I arrived in Salmon Arm, and I suddenly saw a convoy of trucks going nowhere, so I absolutely noped out of that and went into the Walmart parking lot. Okay, I'm gonna make a phone call. Hey, any news on what's going on with that road closure? But is there an ETA on opening of the highway? Can I get out over here? So my plan here was I was going to be a complete wise ass and take Highway 1 until I just had enough gas, because I know all the gas stations around here, so I could almost make it home. And it sucks. We went from Calgary to Salmon Arm. We still have an eighth of a tank. We could have very well made it to, like, Chase or Sorrento, something like that. And we're not going to be able to do that. So instead, I got to turn around. We're going to have to go back into Salmon Arm. I'm going to gas up. And then we're going to take a back road home, which is Highway 97C through Vernon and Falkland, back to Highway 1. Is it a long detour? Yes. Does it save time? Absolutely not. I don't exactly know where I am. Oh, I know where I am right now. Okay, so, embarrassingly, what I'm going to have to do here is we're going to have to do one last final tank before we're done here, which is going to close off all of these numbers. So for this tank here, odometer is 373,936. We refilled it on, I don't want to say like a 1/16 of a tank. We'll just say an 1/8 of a tank again. But what are our actual numbers that matter here? So we added 63.005 liters at a price of $1.53 9/10 cents. Total cost $96.96. Now to figure out my detour. Highway 97. I have no idea where I am on 97, but everybody has their high beams on, so I'm blinded. There we go. Can you see me? No, you can't see me. Now you can see me. Now I have my high beams on. Alright, through the darkness we go. Well, after quite literally having to drive the long way around a mountain and through some pretty dodgy late night shortcuts, actually not even late night, anyways, I am now about to intersect again with Highway 1. And I have officially returned into the Thompson Valley. I am now 15 kilometers from home. There is nothing to tell me we are not going to finish this trip tonight. We will get home, I will get to sleep in a bed, and I will be able to quite happily say we have done in 1 month 10,000 1,000 kilometers in a fairly well-maintained Eagle wagon. There's just one last thing left to do. Let's get our gas numbers. Here we go, folks. Finally, the last gas ticket. Our odometer at our final point was 374,040. This was all highway driving. We refilled this at 7/8 full. We didn't add that much gas. But overall, we added 11.014 liters at $1.64 per liter at a cost of $18.16 Canadian. I think that was the most expensive gas we had this whole trip. But so ends it. We've done it. This is where we started with our first odometer check and top off, and this is the last point. From this point here, I'll go home and crunch the numbers. We'll look over the vehicle. I can get some sleep. We're done.
All right, it has been a couple days here. I've gotten the luggage box off the roof, and it's time for our final inspection. So overall, I didn't find any issues with the tires. Brakes look all good. Paint-wise, we did end up with a little bit of roof rash. I should have put foam strips here. Everything else has been landing on those. So it's right here and over there. I have these kind of annoying little tiny scuffs. I fixed those. They look a lot better once I just went over it with like a once a year wax rub. And same goes over here. You can kind of see it. The felt strap, sure, it protected from the clasp and the metal piece from damaging the bottom, but nothing prevented the strap from scuffing it. So unfortunately it cleaned up a lot, but it's still there. So I guess that's permanent, but I'll just kind of mask it with the fact that someone's already brutalized these already. But okay, they came out fine. Exterior wise, it did clean up with the rain that we saw on the way back. I think the bigger question, of course, is still how did the engine hold up? And on first visual, let's take a look at the air cleaner. If we have any blow-by, we'll see it in here. And well, that's a first start. Man, it is filthy in there now. It's pretty dirty. I mean, it's fine for now, but that'll need to be cleaned. The dirt that's... Like, I cleaned this before we left, and it's full of trash again. So, clean your air cleaners regularly. Might be time to clean the PCV breather, but other than that, it seems like no oil has blown in there. Speaking of oil, I mean, sure, we had that. We were talking about that before. It's fine. Still looks really good. Everything looks good there. We still have our slicking here. So the water pump is definitely going bad. So that'll need to be changed, which sucks, but oh well. I guess that's the third water pump I'm going to have to change out on this car. You can see those white specks up here before that I mentioned. So that is just the water pump slinging off coolant occasionally. And it's not something like, say down here, it likes to leak out of these once they're cold. So that all looks good. How are we for coolant? We're still halfway down on the reservoir tank. That's fine. There is an astounding amount of bugs in front of the radiator. It is amazing. This has to all get cleaned out. But it looks good. The alternator looks good. Let's take a look underneath. This looks great. Yeah, no, like a little bit of oil here and there, but that's all exactly as it was before. That seal actually turned out to be a bad yoke. So when we were fixing, are you going to focus on me here? Or are you going to like just say hello background? There, good enough. So that yoke had to be replaced, but I had a spare, thank God. And hey, look at that.
So that is still in place, so no problems there. So I think it fared really well. Yeah, no other issues here at all. Yeah, even for that squeaky spring perch bushing, like, I put my weight on this now. No squeaks from that at all. The other side holding up? No, that side wants to get greased now. Okay. Fair enough. Let's check our oil level here. Now remember, we went most of the trip without adding oil. And of course, we're above full again. So I'm going to do a full oil change here. So we didn't even have to add a quart of oil. That's less than a quart of oil, not bad. Transmission fluid, even though we can't really level check right now, doesn't look horrible. So that's fine. Our fuel filter, well, these new Fram filters, you can't really tell, but I can guarantee you that's clean. Like, it's clean tank, clean lines, clean everything in there, so that's good. Mechanically, it's all intact fluid-wise. It held everything really well. No overheats, no breakdowns. It did a really, really, really good job. Thank you, Eagle. AMC, you made a really good car here.
So, the drive is now over. What are our fuel numbers and economy looking like? Just like what we did with the Part 1 tally, I have taken all of our fuel receipts and all of the numbers that we had taken and recorded during this trip and put them into a spreadsheet so we could calculate and get our totals out of everything. We traveled from Kamloops to Chicago and back 6,666 kilometers. You can't get any more awesome than that. That's a perfect number to end on. We consumed 899.73 liters of fuel, and it cost us $1,229.99. My budget for fuel for this trip was $2,000, so I was under budget once again, this time by $770.01 Canadian. Really not all that bad. Now for our MPG calculations. Just like before, we have two different ways we can do this because I'm not totally confident on the numbers that I auto-magically average and calculate on the spreadsheet. So we can look at this two different ways. The first is to take the total amount of fuel we used as well as the total distance traveled, convert those into miles and gallons, and then with the math on that, we come to 17.426 miles per gallon. Okay, that's lower than we had for California, but 17 is a number we've touched on before. Now, what happens if we take those 17 tanks? Remember, the first tank doesn't count on any of these because that was our baseline. And we average those 17 miles per gallon entries. What do we get? Well, we get 17.61 miles per gallon, which is interesting. So now we have two numbers at 17 miles a gallon, and this about also adds up to about, what was it, 17 miles a gallon that we did previously for California? 17.17 miles per gallon. Okay, that's really not all that bad at all. In fact, if I might add, this means that with the roof cap on top of the car and a very similar amount of weight inside the vehicle for the trip, that cargo box only cost us about 2 miles per gallon on our economy for the entire trip. That's really not bad at all. So there's our numbers, and I'm quite satisfied with that. We didn't use too much fuel. Our fuel economy was not as good as I was expecting it to be, but it was still very good for a vehicle of its age. Great. So let's close out on this video now and summarize the rest of the trip.
Okay, I understand there's a little bit of change in scenery here and a continuity break, but yeah, this video series took upwards of 6 months to edit and complete. So if there's one thing I really have to put some respect to with these like driving videos, they're able to edit them really fast. I'm not able to do that. Admit your own mistakes. The point I'm trying to make here is that I'm really hoping that this video wasn't too dry. There was nothing dramatic that happened along the way besides, well, we had an axle bearing decide to do something stupid, and, well, it managed to get itself back home, and we had a water pump whose bearing decided to start leaking, then fix itself, and here we are now. We're back at home, and it's still got the same stupid water pump in it because I don't want to change it when it's cold outside. But I hope that I was able to supply good data with this set of videos. We now know what a typical fuel economy for traveling a vehicle like this with and without a cargo top. We know what kind of risks you may run into mechanically, even on a fairly well-maintained version of this car. And we now know how comfortable of a ride it is, which is to say, it's not great without air conditioning, but if you don't mind suffering with some of the fuel economy, air conditioning one of these cars is probably suggested. Otherwise, I'm quite happy with this vehicle, and that's why I daily it right now. And by the way, for those of you who are asking, we don't use salt here in British Columbia. A lot of your rust comes from gravel wash and sandblasting because we use a lot of road grit. But for plans to make a future video where we're going to do this again, unless, like, really, this sucked. Unless someone paid me, I don't want to do this again because it was just so much work and so much effort. And as you can see again, it's snow white outside and I'm wearing a jacket. It took this long to edit. But I really hope you enjoyed this two-part video series. I really hope you enjoyed this trip through 2024. And until next time, have a good one. If you like this video and you wish to see more videos from me, either covering this car or doing repairs and discussions on older tech, follow my channel here on CellGen Studios or follow me on the below social networks.